Hi.
Hi.
This is me. Okay. There we go. Hey, now you're off camera. Don't worry. Okay? We're good. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Unschooling 101. This is presented by me. My name is Judy Arnall, and I'm an education consultant. I have been teaching parent education around Calgary Canada for about 23 years. And tonight I'm going to talk about unschooling. Now, unschooling is kind of a subset of homeschooling. I think a lot of you are familiar with homeschooling. Definitely here in Strathmore, there's some homeschoolers in the audience. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Just be aware we're recording. So what I thought I might do is just quickly go through about 40 minutes of slides and explanation, and then we could open it up to questions. I'm not sure if we're going to record questions. Are we, or?
Oh, they get recorded, but I don't show anybody's faces.
Okay, all right. So just be aware, if you have questions you don't want on the recording, feel free to email me or stay behind after and we can talk one-to-one. Does that make sense? The adult attention span is 40 minutes, so I promise I won't go over 40 minutes. I have a whole whack of slides, and I'm going to pick and choose which ones to show to you, okay? Does that sound good? Okay, awesome. So let's roll. So I specialize in non-punitive parenting, and when my kids got to the education system, that was one part I didn't really like because I really think education should be fun and non-coercive. I'm going to skip over all this stuff. So I wrote a book called Unschooling to University, and I'll tell you why. It's because, let me explain what unschooling is. First of all, what it is kind of self-directed learning. So it's allowing the learner, which is usually children, your children, to learn whatever they want, whenever, however, in their whatever method. And sometimes they choose different topics to learn or not. What it mostly is play. So it's letting kids play, and through their play, they learn everything they need to pretty well to go into more formal studies in high school or on to university. So I wrote, my kids did this, and I saw their friends did this too. When they reached about university age, a lot of them were heading to post-secondary. And I thought, well, if we can unschool for anywhere from 3 to 12 years and go on to post-secondary, this story needs to get out. So I wrote a book on it, and I focused on 30 kids. Of those 30 kids, 10 went into STEM careers, 10 went into arts, and 10 went into humanities. And as of now, 21 have graduated their degree or college programs, and the rest are still there working on it. So I call them the team of 30. And in the book, I kind of outline how many years they played instead of going to school or homeschooling, and how they got into post-secondaries. Okay, we have an organization called Unschooling Canada. There's a lot of people there. We have a website. There's a lot of resources on there. If you want to find out more or send your relatives to there, that's really good too. And we also have a blog, and a blog outlines a lot of questions, answers a lot of questions. Okay, so moving on. We're not going to cover all that tonight, definitely. So why would you even consider this? Okay, what is the problem with schooling right now? Well, when you look at kids, what do they bring to school? They bring a lot of curiosity and passion for learning. They're learning sponges. And after a year or two, they start losing that curiosity and start being spoon-fed, right? And when do they lose it? Somewhere between age 5 and 15, a lot of children become disengaged from school. Our high school rate, completion rate in 3 years is about, actually it's moved up, it's probably about 78% as of 2 years ago. And over 5 years, it moves to 80%. But what that means is 20% of kids are not finishing high school. That's 1 in 5 children. And to me, that's really sad that we're going to lose 1 in 5 children that have great potential. So maybe the key is self-directed education. That's my solution I propose. So to explain this better, this is what we did. This is kind of small to see, I'm sorry. But when kids are born to about age 6, what do? Play. That's what they do. They play, right? Actually, we are all homeschoolers for the first 5 years. We really are. And then as soon as they turn 6, we take them off their play track and we say, I'm sorry, you have to go on a different track. This is called school. But what if we just let them continue playing all the way through, whatever they want to do, self-directing, whatever they want to learn about, right? This is what people do, and we're called unschoolers. And what happens is at the end, when their brain reaches about 17, they become a lot more motivated. Their executive function really completes that final upswing. And what they can do is study the final courses, grade 12 courses, write the exams, and then go on to the post-secondaries they want to. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? Yeah? All right. Now you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, so if a 17-year-old has had no formal education and they want to go to university, how do they do that? Okay, so let's pick a career they want to go to. What's a career? Doctor. Okay. Alrighty. Now, as you can see, this is the development of the prefrontal cortex. And at age 17, they start reaching that final hump of self-control and motivation, right? And that's probably about the age when they look around, their peers are going off to college and universities, and they think, well, maybe I want to do that too. Maybe I want to be a doctor. So I'm going to quit playing Fortnite and Legos, and I'm going to become a doctor. How can they do that? Well, a doctor is usually the most common answer. So they can really cram for 2 years. So now let's say they're motivated, right? That's the key, is they have to be motivated. What they have to do is read the key. Oh, I meant to bring the key tonight. The key are little study books, and they're available free through the library systems. Do you have Solaro? Yeah, that's where you find the keys, right? So they study the English 30-1, they read the key, write the diploma exam. They got a mark for English. Do the same with social. Then with biology, they can do the same too. With math and chemistry, they may have to take more of the grade 11s, grade 10s, and the grade 12 courses just to get a better feel, because those courses do build on each other in Alberta. And Math 31, they can take that, but they can often take that at university too, upgrading. So it takes about 2 years preparation to do 8 courses. Okay, if they start at 17, they're ready at 19 to go into their undergrad degree and start their journey to doctor. Does that make sense? Okay, any questions so far? No? Mm-hmm.
Will we get a printed copy of this presentation or an emailed copy of the presentation? Or should I note everything?
The presentation is being recorded, and you will be able to find it on YouTube, on the Marigold Library System, their YouTube channel.
Awesome.
So the question was, is the slides going to be distributed. And no, they're not, but the whole recording will be presented on YouTube through the Marigold library system. Okay, so 8 courses, there you go. And you're probably thinking, okay, how can someone start at grade 10 in those courses and not have prerequisite knowledge? Well, the thing is, they're not starting at grade 10. They are learning what they need to know through their daily activities, through life learning, through their play. And although all of it is not formal learning, it's not bookwork learning, it's learning through different experiences. So as you can see, school is only one way that people learn, but there are lots of other ways, people and experience being the major ones. Okay? So basically, there's 3 ways to get an education in Alberta. We're all familiar with school, which is government controlled. And then there's home education, which is parent controlled. And then there's unschooling, or what is learner controlled. So there's 3 routes to get an education. I really like this diagram. This is the cone of learning by Edgar. And basically, what he's saying is at the top of the hierarchy, when people just sit and read and listen, they remember about 10 to 30% 2 weeks later. But when people at the bottom of the pyramid are doing the real thing, getting out, experiencing, they remember 90 to 100% of what they've learned 2 or 3 weeks later. So it's better for kids to get out in the community actually doing things rather than sit in a classroom and listen and hear and write, right? Experiential education is much more satisfying, and kids retain a lot more of what they learn. So imagine, I like to use the buffet of knowledge kind of thing. So imagine that education is like food on a table, okay? And the child's standing there with their plate. And in school, the government decides what types of food and how much goes on their plate. In home education, it's the parent that decides. But in unschooling, it's the child decides. They decide if they're going to have more broccoli on their plate or more chocolate on their plate. Do they want the broccoli, which is math, or do they want the chocolate, which is video games? And if you don't put one on a pedestal, they will choose among the whole table of education. Okay? How do kids learn? They learn depending on age, and I outlined different age groups. So little kids tend to play. School-age kids tend to play. They love to play. Teenagers learn more through projects, through part-time jobs, through volunteering, through travel, through joining clubs, and all those things you can do through home education. Unschooling is a subset of home education. Basically, it's a certain methodology, okay? Does that make sense? Any more questions? Yeah? So in a definition, unschooling is knowledge acquired on a need-to-know time frame, as determined by the learner. So if a child needs to know something, they learn it. An example is my daughter was enrolled in Girl Guides when we unschooled, and she didn't know the words to "O Canada," so we were singing "O Canada," and then I was a leader, so I was there. And then she came home the next day, that night, and she said, "Mom, I don't know the words to "O Canada." So she looked it up, she practiced, she sang it, and the next week at Girl Guides, she knew it, right? So that's kind of an example of unschooling, where learners learn what they need to know as they need it. They find the motivation to do it. Okay, now it goes by different terms. In a school, it's called self-directed education. At home, it's called unschooling. And they got that term from the 70s. John Holt was an education guru in the 70s, and he called it unschooling. It doesn't mean anti-school. It means that a lot of its characteristics are so different from school. home education tends to be taking the school model of subjects, of certain time periods, of bells, of recess. Some home educators do uniforms. Taking that and bringing it in the home, which is not much different than school. But unschooling is so different in that we don't have subjects, we don't have bells, we don't have uniforms, we don't have mandatory curriculum. It is so much more learner-centered and so much more embedded into life rather than school and life. That makes sense? Yeah. Alrighty. Okay. And I think teachers are absolutely wonderful what they're dealing with in the parameters they're dealing with right now. And when you look at why do home educators do so well? Why do home educated kids do well? The research shows that parents don't need to be teachers, and it doesn't depend on the income level of the family. They do well because of that one-to-one relationship, right? That's present in home education. And that is what's critical, is that adult-child relationship. Doesn't matter. I mean, they can learn anything they need to through the internet or through curriculum or learning that's out there. It's that relationship that is built over time that really, really makes a difference. All right, I'm going to give you a little brief history of our story. So like I said, I really believe in non-punitive parenting. I teach it. I had a really hard time when I sent my kids to school and education became very coercive. They lost their love of learning. By about grade 2, my oldest kids did not want to go to school anymore. So this is my oldest. He came home one day and he really, really wanted to plant an egg to see if it grew an egg tree. See, there's his little egg. And he nagged me and I said, oh, you'll learn that in school, probably in biology 30, but that's not the kind of eggs I want you to learn about. So I couldn't stop his obsession. So finally, we decided to do it. Let's plant an egg and see if it grows an egg tree. And 2 weeks later, he learned that it doesn't work, right? But he satisfied his curiosity. And more, my kids were coming home and wanting to learn what they wanted to learn. They spent 6 hours a day at school learning somebody else's agenda. So more and more, we did what many parents call after-schooling. We did our own learning after. And after a while, I thought, why am I doing this? Because I'm spending so much time after school helping them learn what they really wanted to learn. So then we decided, okay, let's pull them out and do school at home, homeschool. So we took the school model and brought it home. And because that's the only thing we saw, that's what media shows you about homeschooling is, kitchen table, workbooks, mom, blackboard on the wall. I thought that's what homeschooling was. So by November, they stopped listening to me. Why? Because I'm mom. I'm safe. They don't have to listen to me. And I had a preschooler and a toddler underfoot, and I was busy. I could not make them stay at the table and do a math workbook. You can see right there, it says, I hate mathematics. So I like to say we're homeschoolers that never got around to homeschooling. Things slid bad. And so more and more, the kids just played. We didn't do any formal curriculum, and we did that for 10 years. It was fun. So much fun. So relaxing. They loved it. I loved it. It was great. During that time, though, I thought, I'm going to write a book about this eventually. And I asked them to write the provincial achievement tests, even though they had no formal curriculum. So they wrote math and science because math and English, because social studies and science is very much tied to topics per grade, and we didn't do that. So they scored about acceptable, and in some subjects, depending on the kid, they scored excellence. So they're still learning, right? And what I would do is I'd keep track of things that they learned or said, just so I would have a record of how they progressed through their play. The interesting thing was a lot of what they were learning actually paralleled the Alberta programs of study from grades 1 to 6, but they came at it naturally, right? So show me a child who doesn't like magnets or boats or playing with boats or floating boats in water or playing in water or, visiting a wetland and they're equipped with their little nets and stuff and jars. They love that stuff. Let them at it, right? Don't park them in front of a book on wetlands. Take them out to Ralph Klein Park and show them the wetlands. Experiential learning, they will really absorb that. So their first full day of school was, depending on the child, I have 5 kids, by the way. It was either grade 10 or 11 or 12. But for the most part, they lasted anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months in school, and then they came back home to self-direct their high school program. Now, everybody in the province has to write provincial exams, diploma exams, if they want marks and credits in grade 12 subjects. So, like I said, at about age 17, they were motivated to cram a bit more, learn, study the keys, and go write the diploma exams. And they did. They scored an average of 78% on 21 exams. Okay. The provincial average in Alberta on those exams is 65%. So clearly letting them play for 10 to 12 years did not really hurt their educational attainment. Alrighty. In fact, what it did help was avoiding burnout. So when kids go from preschool to grade 12, they're in school like sometimes 16 years. No wonder they're burning out by grade 10. And those are the years that count. The high school marks are where they should be gearing up instead of burning out. Okay, so I had 4 kids accepted to universities. 3 of them went into STEM careers, and 3 of them have graduated so far. So that's our story. There are 3 of the 30 kids I wrote about. Any questions so far?
I have 4 kids. One of them is in high school right now.
Mm-hmm.
She's taking her Math 10 and Science 10 through EDLC.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't like it. So, is it too late to unschool, or can you just go into it at any age? After you've been doing the homeschooling method for a while, would it be good?
How old is she? 15?
She's
Okay. Should I repeat the question, or do you think they can hear?
She's probably close enough to the mic there.
Okay. All right. It probably wouldn't hurt to take a year or 2 off to de-school, get back her passion for learning, finding out what she wants to do for a career path. But if she wants to continue, yes. We have a change in government, so we might get another 2 years of funded education. So when I said the cutoff was age 19, that might move to 21. Don't quote me. I don't know if that's going to happen. Anything can happen, but then she would still have more years to pick it up later. If she wanted, she could take those textbooks at home, read through them, work out some questions in the back of each chapter, like self-study, and then just challenge the exam and get marks and credits that way.
Yeah.
If she wants. Because a lot of times if kids go online, because teachers can't see children, there's a lot of written book work that doesn't really need to be assigned like in a classroom.
Yeah.
So those are work-heavy courses. Yeah. Yes?
Just further to that question. So what if the child did all that book work and studying and worked through it, challenged the exam, failed? Is there a huge cost for redoing it? Is there a time frame before you can redo it?
Not at all. Even in diploma exams, you can rewrite the diploma exams the next sitting it costs $26 to retake it. And when you rewrite diploma exams, Alberta Education is really nice, and they take whatever the higher mark is for your transcript. Yeah, so those aren't really high stake exams because you can always recover. Yes?
Have you ever come across kids that don't ever get motivated?
Yes, there are some kids that aren't motivated by age 17. But who's to say they don't become motivated by 21 or 34 or 46 or 59, right? And you see that when people change careers. You see engineers become artists because they went into the wrong path. They didn't really truly find their passions, and they make a career change and want to recover that. So kids generally do, a lot of it's peer pressure around age 17, but a lot of it is discovering who they are and what they want to do for their life. For example, me, I didn't go to university until I was 25, right? Because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But when I was 25, I was motivated. And when motivation is there, everything else takes care of itself. All right. Did we lose our... Okay, there we are. Just talk a little bit about the research. There are two famous free schools. There's the Sudbury Valley School. Now, free schools do not depend on government funding, so they can do whatever they want. Kids can learn the curriculum of Nintendo if they want, right? And Sudbury Valley has a whole network of schools, mostly across the U.S., but also across the world. Summerhill in the UK has been unschooling kids from 1921, and the government there tried to shut them down, but they have proven records that kids learn, they pass exams, they go on to wherever they want to go. The Fraser Report, how many have heard of that? Okay, so this is really good for the naysayers in your life. Especially 2015, they published a guide on Canadian homeschooling that shows really good outcomes, that homeschoolers outperform both public and private school students, and there's no advantage if parents are certified teachers. It eliminates socioeconomic effects, which means that no matter what the income level of the family is, home-educated kids do well. They're involved in 8 social activities outside the home, which kind of blows out that, what about socialization question? They're very well socialized. And they scored high life satisfaction. Not to mention the amount of taxpayer dollars we save the government and everybody else. The primary models of behavior are adults rather than peers, and that's a big one. Like I said, it's the relationship that matters the most. And there's more. Dr. Peter Gray, he has a PhD in psychology at Boston College, and he has done a study that shows that the more structured education children had, including homeschooling and public school, the less likely those kids would be to go on to post-secondary. So the more loose it was, the more likely they would. And children need more adults and more play in their lives. We're getting that message out to parents out there all over, from Peter Gray, from Gordon Neufeld, from Sir Ken Robinson, and Pat Ferenga. There are a lot of people, experts, that say that children need play and they also need adults. Okay, in Canada, in Alberta, there's about 10,000 homeschoolers, probably more. I don't know the up-to-date research. And about 10% of those are unschoolers. Now I'm going to, so any questions on that?
You still need to be part of a board if you're unschooled.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you go back to your stats? The 10% are unschoolers, but what's the majority?
Yeah. So the regulations in Alberta is that you do have to sign up with a supervising school board by September 30th because you want to get funding, right? You get about $850 per child per year. You can buy Lego, music lessons, whatever you want to buy, right? And you have to have 2 teacher supervisor visits a year. So one in the fall, one in the spring, and you have to file a learning plan. So how do you file a learning plan if you don't know what your kids are going to learn? That's the question. Well, I have samples here you can look at after, but you can file a learning plan, very general outcomes. I handed out the schedule of home education outcomes to you in Strathmore. That is what your child needs to know by the time they turn 19. All right? Does that look okay? Pretty flexible? Right? That is the outcomes we follow. Now, if you want to follow the Alberta programs of study, they have 1,400 outcomes per grade. If you want to check all those off, you can go ahead and do that, but you don't have to. Every child who's registered in school in Alberta has to follow the Alberta programs of study, but only home ed, you don't have to. Yes?
The handout, is that available online anywhere?
I can send it to you. Yeah, actually it is. It's on the Alberta Homeschooling.ca website. Yeah, and same with the list of supervising schools.
We've been teacher-directed at home up until now.
Mm-hmm.
And some of my research in the last couple weeks has been really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The 10,000, that's traditional homeschooling, right? That's not learning at home?
No, that is parent-controlled home education.
Okay, because just chatting with ADLC, I think, Alberta Distance Learning, they have alone 10,000 doing school online from home. So that was something I didn't understand until this year, the difference between teacher-directed and parent-directed, and now child-directed.
Yes.
There's a lot.
Okay, so parent-directed, child-directed is under home education. I didn't bring my hats, but anything else is school. So ADLC is school. Online, school. School controls everything. You can't unschool on a school program. They have to follow the Alberta programs of studies, and they have to provide a certificated teacher teach the content. Okay? So this is under home education, and under your method, you put self-directed learning. Okay? And then you can put any resources you want on your learning plan. Anything you want to buy, you got to make sure it's tied to your learning plan. So this year, I have, after 5 kids, I have everything pretty well in my house that I could buy. Except more video games. So I've claimed a video game, which I thought was kind of educational. I mean, if you look at that list of outcomes, you could put Minecraft, and it would teach all those things pretty well. Absolutely. Okay. Maybe not phys ed, but it's very open, very vague. So anything you want to do could be slotted in there. Okay. For the most part, a lot of my learning plans stay the same every year, except probably what my kids are reading, because their abilities go up. So maybe one year my child's reading the Warriors book series. Maybe next year it's Harry Potter. Maybe the next year it's Red Wall or whatever. So that kind of changes. But a learning plan is work in progress. You are not tied to it. If something's not working for you, if you want to ditch it and rewrite it, go right ahead, email it to your supervisor. Okay, makes sense? Okay, any other questions? I just want to skip to this. This is a lot of stuff, but I just want to, yeah, like I said here, this is why kids don't start school until age 6, because they don't have that self-control and executive function to sit still, listen, pay attention, do the work, right? And you can see that starts building here, and about age 17, it starts going up in that final leap. So if you're homeschooling your 9-year-old and they're sitting at the table and they're not listening, they're not paying attention, that's why. That's not to say they won't be like that at 17.
How do you manage that?
I say, okay, we're done. Let's go play. Now, best practices is not to force kids to learn, is maybe, take a week off, maybe make it more fun, maybe go on a field trip instead of book work or stuff like that, right? Yeah, you don't want to be battling over schoolwork. Absolutely don't, because the relationship's the most important, right? You're building a relationship. They can learn fractions any old day, but you don't want to be the yelling person. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about on brain development. Oh, let's talk about math. I always get that question, is math. So kids learn a lot of math through play, through doing maybe a lemonade stand, selling Girl Guide cookies, shopping, baking in the kitchen. Kids learn fractions, decimals, adding, subtracting, all that kind of thing. These are all things my kids learn through play. Either video games or play with their siblings or friends. For example, coordinates. They learn that through playing Battleship, right? Games are really, really good for learning things. Settlers of Catan. There's a really good game for social studies, right? And it's fun. Kids love it. But what happens is 13, they start getting their brain development, their abstract thinking skills. That's why they don't really introduce algebra until grade 7. Because up until then, kids have to learn about things that are in their immediate environment. Starting junior high, that's when they start learning more things they can't see or touch. So abstract things. And that's a good age to start transferring more learning onto paper for math. Okay? So my 3 kids that were going to a STEM career, I said to them around age 13, 14, I said, do you want to do a more formal math program? And thank goodness they said yes, because they wanted to go into engineering or biosciences. So they started their first online math course in grade 8. And you're probably wondering, well, how do they learn 8 grades of math in 1 year? Are you wondering that? Nobody? Yes. Yes. Okay. How do they? But they don't learn it in 1 year. They've had 8 years of learning through play. Now they're just switching to a different track where they're learning it on paper, right? So now, even though they learned fractions in baking, now they're learning how to add fractions on paper. And they're really quick. They pick it up really fast. It's like toilet training a 4-year-old. You can do it in half a day because they're ready. Absolutely ready. Okay? Okay, that's all I wanted to cover on brain development. And I've explained it. What did I not explain? Oh, yeah. That's kind of just reiterating how it works. The traditional parent-directed versus distance education. So one is home education, one is school. But you can do a half and half program called shared responsibility. Let's say you're really worried about English and math. You don't trust this unschooling thing. You can say you want to outsource math and English to a school. You can do that. You can say, okay, I'm going to put you online for math and English, and the rest of the subjects like art and science and social studies and health, we're going to just unschool it. You can do that too, right? You take responsibility for those subjects. The school takes responsibility for the math and English. You only get half the funding though. Okay, few myths. So, unschooling is determined totally by the child. Now, if a child wants more structure and wants to do workbooks, it's still unschooling because it comes from the child. The child has to want to do it. Okay? But if there's any motivation problems at all, it is not self-directed education. The child has to want to do things. If they're not motivated, then they're not going to do it. Okay? We talked about that. And unschooling is not permissive. There's always a parent or adult around to be the facilitator. So a 5-year-old may want a book on planes but can't get to the library. So your job is to facilitate their education. And that's actually the regulations in Alberta. Parents don't have to teach. All you have to do is provide your child's education. So you can hire tutors if you want. You can organize a group. You can pull resources from anywhere in the world. They don't have to be Alberta government resources because chemistry is chemistry, right? And when you look at sites like Khan Academy, beautiful, wonderful videos that kids can watch over and over and teach themselves math. My kids got through math and science through Khan Academy, and they actually use it for first year university too, right? Duolingo is a great app for learning languages when they want to do it. Okay, I'm not going to talk. So how to unschool? Just provide lots of time and have a rich environment. Take them to science centers, zoos, theater, have lots of games, toys, art supplies, things like that. Okay? So what is needed is a facilitator, and that's you, resources, and lots of free time. Those 3 things. What do kids do all day? And like I said, it changes as per their age, but this is what my kids did all day. They learned to own their learning, and that's a big thing. They didn't sit at home and expect to be spoon-fed or entertained, because I made it very clear from the beginning, I'm not entertaining, I'm writing books. So you have to go find your own play. And they did. They went off and played. They made a lot of messes too, and I would have to organize that part as getting them to clean up. But pretty well, that's what they did all day. Okay, music and language, that was really interesting. My 7-year-old daughter, she sat down, she was really interested in the piano one summer. So what does a parent do? Sign them up for piano lessons, right? Yes. So I did that for fall, and by spring she wasn't practicing. She wasn't playing. She wasn't going near that piano. So I said, okay, I get it. So we quit lessons, and I said, I'm not going to get you lessons again until you ask me 3 times. And it didn't happen until the 3 older kids were about 16, 17, and all 3 wanted lessons. One wanted violin, one wanted guitar, and one wanted piano. So I made sure they asked me at least 3 times because they had to be motivated, and they did. So I figured out lessons, I wrote the checks, I drove them, but they were responsible for everything else. And that was the beauty when they transitioned to university. They're already self-directed in their education. They transfer very beautifully because they're used to setting their own goals and deadlines and working on their own. So they took music and language lessons for a couple years, and then they continued on. Today, they're still teaching themselves. Alrighty, I'm not going to talk about that because I said I'd keep it. Benefits. Okay, so I outlined 61 benefits in my book. I'm not going to cover them all here, but there's academic benefits such as a one-to-one, motivating. I think the biggest one there is personalized learning, right? Emotional benefits, there's freedom from bullying. There's more social activity that's healthy, guided by adults. Physical benefits, my teens get to sleep until 2 p.m. They grow their brains. and they weren't very cranky. I think the problem with teens nowadays is they're so cranky because they don't get enough sleep due to screens and everything else. Physical benefits, they got exercise, they go out a lot. Yeah, there are a lot of benefits. People would say, well, if your kids sleep till 2 p.m., how are they going to get up for a job? Or how are they going to get up for 8 a.m. classes? And my classic answer is, when they need to do it, they'll do it, right? You establish habits in 3 days to 3 weeks. So now 3 of my kids are in their career jobs. They get up every day and go to work at 8 a.m. My daughter gets up about 5 because she has really long hair and she has to wash it. So when they need to do it, they'll do it. Okay, and there's lots of advantages. I'm sorry that print is a little too small, but probably the biggest one is motivation is never a problem. Child is always developmentally ready for what they're learning. There's no learning anxiety. The child understands rather than just memorizes. They develop independence, self-reliance, and responsibility. They learn how to access information. The absorption of material is high because they're interested. There's no lesson plans required. There's no power struggles. And they develop a love of learning for its intrinsic value rather than extrinsic rewards. Creativity, initiative, decision-making, and problem-solving is enhanced. And learner is exposed to a diverse society. So when they're out in the community rather than within 4 walls, they are exposed to people of different ages, religious backgrounds, sexual orientation. They experience a more diverse society. Disadvantages, yes, there are some. Interests erupt at inconvenient times. Maybe you have visitors and you don't want to go out and plant an egg tree. Cost is maybe a barrier because funding is not all that great in Alberta for home education. Learning is invisible and difficult to measure. Now that's a big one the school system has a problem with, is that they need evidence of learning. But if you don't force your kids to write an essay, you don't have that evidence. You know they learn because you know what they learn, where they're at in every subject, every minute of the day. You know because you live with them. But to prove it to the government is really hard if you don't make your kids do exams and write essays. So, but that's okay. You know. So basically, you just give a report to the government on what you observe. Okay, and when you don't see any learning happen, it's difficult to trust that because our idea of learning is not what's going on in their heads, right? Especially when they play video games for months on end. Now, what about that? Well, they just play video games all day. What do you think? Maybe? Maybe not. Okay, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to squeeze over that. Sorry. Too many slides.
Can I ask a redundant question?
Yes.
So you said that it's very hard to quantify their learning because we aren't using any typical method. When it comes to passing grades with the homeschool, with your curriculum plan and that kind of thing, how is that done? If you aren't quantifying essays.
On home education, there's no marks, no grades, no exams. So I didn't even tell my kids what grade they were in. Like, people would ask my daughter, what grade are you in? And she'd say, oh, I'm level 80. Because she was playing World of Warcraft, right? So no, we don't have to give grades or marks or anything. The only thing is, at the end of the road, if homeschooled, unschooled kids want marks and credits for grade 12 subjects, and those are the only subjects that matter. Basically, when you apply to universities online, there's only fields for grade 12 subjects and marks. So if they want credits, they write their diploma exams. If they wait until they're 19, it's 100% of their course mark. Okay? And I'm lucky I'm so happy Alberta has diploma exams because it's a little harder in other provinces to prove. Yeah. What they do is they write the SATs. Okay. Will there be gaps? Yes, there will. There will be gaps, but there will also be gaps with kids in public school. Because if you look at all the countries in the world to study, teachers have to pick and choose too. They cannot learn all countries, right? So it's better that the learner picks what they want rather than the government decides what they want or they should learn. Talked about that. Okay. What if they play video games all day? All right. Video games are very educational. They teach all those wonderful things: cooperation, commitment, teamwork, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and innovation. And I'm not just talking about educational video games. I'm talking about anything in life teaches a child something. They learn. Absolutely. This is my son. He was in an online class, a live class. He had 2 screens. And he was playing his video game, and then the teacher would ask him a question, he'd give her an answer, and then he'd go back to his video games. And she never knew this, right, until I showed her the picture at the end of the year. But, yeah, that's how engaged he was in the class. He's my engineer now, and he's really good at it. So there's lots of benefits with the internet. There's lots of academic benefits of gaming, information management, critical thinking skills, social benefits, and a lot of artistic stuff too. These are things my kids made because of gaming. I'll show you a few things there. Yep. They do stuff. And all my kids are gamers, the girl just as much as the boys. It's really good. I think it really grows brains too. In what the research shows is that in healthy families where there's not a lot of adverse childhood experiences, that video gaming and cell phone is not an addicting factor. No matter how many hours kids are on there, addictions is the genes in the brain expressing themselves. And usually they are triggered due to environmental problems or stress in the environment. So in a calm family, addictions are very unlikely, including video game addictions. I know I get that concern all the time from parents. Life skills, it teaches them a lot of life skills. A lot of socialization benefits, especially when they have a lot of time on their hands when they're at home. As long as kids have a balanced life, like they need physical activity time and they need some family time. So we set up a few rules like, no screens at our table, and we have dinner every night because when you're homeschooling, you go to activities during the day. So your evenings are all free. Pretty well. It's family time, right? So we can sit down and have a dinner every night. So we have, I stress to the kids to have some balance in their life. All right. Can play replace school? Yes, it can. Absolutely. And I'm going to just end with my favorite poem here. I tried to teach my child with words. They often passed him by unheard. I tried to teach my child with books. He only gave me puzzled looks. Despairingly, I turned aside. How can I teach this child? I cried. Into my hand, he placed the key. Come, he said, and play with me. And that's by Anonymous. But kids really need to expand their play. All right. So, yeah, it's on the internet.
Yeah, but it doesn't have an author. That's really tricky to find.
Right? Okay, if you want to keep in touch, we have, like I said, there's a blog, Unschooling to University. The books are available all over in chapters.
In the library.
Yes, in the libraries across Canada, if it's near your bookstore. If it's not in your bookstore, you can ask for it. And we have a Facebook group called Unschooling STEM. Yeah. All right. So, okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for coming. See you.